I want to talk a little bit about these engines here in the models. Some of you know these models take one of two engines. One is a something called a Conley V8. He has a couple models, and then one's a Conley clone. The Conley V8 is what you're looking at right here. Conley made a few different engines. This is a 327. His most popular back in the nitro engine days when he's making nitro engines was the 427. And I have a different video on that. The 327 is interesting nonetheless. This is an early model. You can tell for a couple of reasons. Now I've made some modifications to this engine for the owner. But one of the early things you'll notice on Conley's first engines, he used a Walbro carburetor intended for gasoline. And so this one has that. So for cars that have these type of carburetors, I have a different type of throttle system connection rather for it. The other thing about this engine, they came with these valve covers, right? Which are cool. They're nice. What I've done is I've altered that, and I've made some more scale-looking covers for the application, the C2 application. And on this particular model, I've included, as you can see, obviously, an alternator setup, which requires I add a crank pulley here, and it already had the water pump on it, water pump housing, and I added the alternator motor as well. And then, of course, routed it with wiring and all that leads for connecting and running the fan for the car. So the engine actually drives that fan to operate. So anyway, I have these, right? These are the fan shrouds. And this is primed. It's got to get a little more work done to it. It gets dropped off to the body shop. This body is actually at the shop right now. So anyway, a little bit about the engine. I've connected this thing up to the starter on the dash I've got sitting back over here. The batteries are sitting up here, and that's how it starts up. And it works quite well. It produces plenty of charge to run the fan at a really high rate too, which is good. So a little bit about these engines. As you can tell, the valve train's open in the front and rear in this engine. Let me zoom in a little bit. So you see the valve train is open. Like I said, and if you look in there, I think you might be able to see let's see. Yeah, you can see the valves actually moving in there. See if I can go a little further in here. Yeah. So anyway, they call it a dirty V8 because of that. And what I did differently was to close off the front and valve, that opening front and valve train on the Conley clones I put in the cars as well. I ordered a few of those and had them made up and sent over and modified them a little bit. But the original Conleys came with, the 327s came with this open. This was the water pump setup. The 427 is much different. It's really cool setup. Same block, but everything else is kind of different. And a lot of differences rather. But the original Conleys, you see the ram horn exhaust here, the manifold. I like the fact Gary used these metal flanges. Gary used his connectors for the spark plugs, or for the glow plugs rather. He used a spring connection clipped in there. It assured great connection, but it wouldn't ground out the system and mess anything up. And so that was always nice. He thought ahead a lot when he did these engines. He really planned it out well. The machining on these things, typically, this stuff's pretty much interchangeable. He did a really good job of keeping things consistent every time you got an engine. He just did a great job with that. And these things are pretty much bulletproof. You can run them. People don't run them a lot because it's tough to get parts. Even though the Australian V8 is a clone, It's tough to just swap out parts. They're just made differently. And so in this particular model, you can see, for example, Gary's attention to detail. Let me zoom in here so you can see. There's a serial number for production on the block there. There it is. This is engine number 00102. And so this is an old engine. Engine might be 30 years old or 35 years old. And then you see JADA. And Gary tells me that that will tell him what date and month the engine was actually made. I put this video together to show just a little bit of what happens when I take the stock look away and add the crank pulley and alternator and belt setup with the new valve covers.